Alright guys, so I'm actually going to be answering a question that I've gotten a few times over the years of owning the Belair. One that I guess, was something I was worried about when I first picked up the car as well. It's this concept of, is the car hobby, inherently expensive, and especially owning a classic car, is it expensive to work on them, maintain them, is it a difficult thing? Because I think it's daunting to a lot of people. Older cars are a lot simpler. I think they have this reputation for, potentially being less reliable, hard to deal with, things breaking all the time. And I just want to kind of go through what it's like owning a car from the 50s and, if it's possible or approachable for someone, normal, or do you need a bunch of money to be able to do this? So I'm going to kind of just walk you through my story with it, and by the end of it, I think you'll have a pretty good picture of if a classic car is for you or not. So one of the first considerations that people go to is obviously money. It's the concept of, how much is the car going to cost, everything that comes along with it. Is that something that I can afford? And the answer to that is obviously, like you hear a lot of times, that it varies. If your standards are extremely high with the car that you want to buy, and you want something that's like this show quality, perfect thing, it's like a piece of history that just rolled off the dealership floor, you're going to pay more money for something like that. And especially if it's a desirable or, a sought after model, your iconic, 65, 66, 7, 8 Mustang, your Tri-5 Chevys, things like that. They add value just because so many people know them and want them. If you get slightly, off variants from those, there's a million interesting and cool classic cars out there that are less known, and, as simple as moving to a 4-door instead of having to have the 2-door, things like that, you can actually save quite a lot of money as far as the initial purchase of the car. In my case, the 59 that I have, it only cost $3,800 for the initial purchase, but did need a lot of work. But that being said, now, if you're looking for a 2-door Impala, that's all done up, that's a very expensive vehicle. But the willingness to work on it and the willingness to, say that, it doesn't have perfect paint and it doesn't have a perfect interior, but that's okay, made it approachable for me. And I was able to fit that into my budget and my lifestyle. So just really consider, what you're okay with spending and what you have before delving down that rabbit hole. Because I think a lot of people shut themselves down too early. When they see the price of a fully done up car, they just say, yeah, I can't do it, it's too much. And they don't really look around and say, well, you know what, maybe I'll get one that needs a little bit of work, but work that's within the realm of what I can do. And, and I'll make it perfect over time. And that affords you then the opportunity to make it your own as well, to personalize it to your taste. So it's worth looking, and considering what you're willing to tackle before discounting it and saying, classic's not for me. Next consideration is going to be storage. So everyone's situation is different, obviously. Me, I don't have a garage, nor do I even have covered parking to work on these things. And again, a lot of people think, oh man, I don't have the facilities to own or work on a classic. I just can't do it. And yeah, you know what? It's not ideal. Sometimes it's hot and gross, and working on a car in the Florida summer sun is not ideal. But it's one of those things where if you persevere and you work through it and you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to make this work, it really shouldn't be a burden. You can work on something like this in the parking spot in your apartment complex, assuming we don't have rules against that. While I would dream about having a 2-car garage where I could park this thing and have space next to it to work on it, I didn't, and it didn't stop me. And I would just say, how driven are you, and how much do you want it? But again, you can see here, it's like I just have a normal little house, nothing fancy, that I've been working on for 5 years to make it look the way it does now. And it's not like I have tons and tons of money or all these nice lavish workspaces and things like that. But again, it was a dream of mine to own a classic, and especially one as cool as this, and I'm making it work. So as you can see, I just keep it on a parking pad under a car cover just to keep the worst of the rain off of it. The nice thing is in Florida at least, the car cover is actually not too bad, because even though we get tons of rain, they dry out very quickly. So I don't have issues with like the rust that can come with, you know, it sitting under a car cover somewhere where it won't dry back out. So yeah, and they do portable shelters and garages and things like that you can, you know, just pop up, and they kind of, you know, they're not a permanent solution, but if you have a space for one, I mean, I've spoken to a couple people who, you know, they've lasted with those shelters for several years and they're still going strong. So as far as storage, you know, it's again an element of, you know, what you're willing to put up with, but I would say don't let that stop you. You know, I think these cars were designed to still be a car like anything else, and, you know, throw a car cover over it if you don't have covered parking and it'll still hold up just fine. So another thing people think is that these things are just incredibly hard to work with. You know, they're grumpy, you know, letting them sit for a while, you know, they're gonna not want to start, and, you know, you're gonna be dealing with constant carburetor issues and stuff like that. And I feel like, you know, while those concerns can happen, usually they're directly related to an issue with the car that can be addressed. And it is very possible to get a classic car to the state of being reliable and able to just be driven, you know. That's been honestly a big focus with the Bell. It was not supposed to be an expensive build with, you know, perfect paint and everything like that. It was supposed to be something that I could just hop in and drive, you know. The first start up on, you know, after it's sitting for a week and a half is always going to be slightly slower than one where it's just been driven the day before, but it's really not too bad. And I'll run you through what I do, so you can kind of see what the steps are, but it's a pretty manageable process, and I think it gets overblown a lot with, you know, people thinking that it's going to take them an hour to get started when actually it's, you know, maybe 10 minutes. And so, you know, yeah, you got to plan ahead a little if you're going to a car show or something like that, or just want to take it for a cruise. Yeah, leave just that little bit earlier so you can get it time to warm up and all that stuff. But it's really not wild, and it's not like you're going to be sitting there fighting it for an hour and then it, you know, not start or whatever. So, you know, just make sure you put your money in the right place with it. Again, make sure your carburetor is serviced properly and, you know, working. Make sure your fuel delivery is good, your plugs are good, your timing is good. You know, focus on those little things, even if they're the boring ones, but you'll end up with a reliable vehicle. And, you know, that will make it so much more enjoyable, rather than, you know, I'm going to buy the flashy chrome parts and, you know, make it look cool. Well, it doesn't matter if it's going to be a brick in your driveway, right? So anyway, let me show you my startup procedure. The car sat for about a week and a half at this point, and you'll see it's really not too bad. All right, well, that was pretty quick and easy. So basically, again, you know, takes a couple extra seconds to get the thing uncovered. Most likely you're not going to be dealing with power locks, you know, so you get stuck with the old, you know, key in the door. So, you know, I know it's just unbearable how long this takes, but whew, how could anyone live with that? All right. So, put her in accessory, flip the compressors on. All right. So for me, because I'm running air ride, I usually do a primary little pump up on the air system. Once it's sat for like a week and a half, the air system does air down. It's not perfectly sealed because, you know, did it all myself, and I am definitely not an expert. But if I had run it, you know, 2-3 days ago, the system would be fine. It would be holding pressure to where it would, you know, I could basically fire the thing right up. But I want to kind of show you the worst case scenario. So usually I'll let this thing run for about, you know, 30-45 seconds. That'll build enough pressure in the tank to start lifting the car up. And the main reason I do that without starting it right away is just because of how low it's sitting. You know, I made a choice that I was okay with basically setting this thing to go as low as humanly possible, but I have long tube headers. So while you see all these guys who can kind of like lay frame and stuff like that, it's because their exhaust tucks up alongside their frame rails. My headers actually hang below my frame rails. So even though it's sitting on the bump stops, the headers are skimming the ground right now. So usually I just want to make sure I lift those off the ground before I start the engine. And again, that's a really weird consideration. Most cars are not going to have anything close to that kind of a quirk. Ugh. So you truly can consider this a worst case scenario. So we're going to start lifting the front up. Get that up to about there. Let me start lifting the back up. and we're already high enough off the ground to start up the motor. That's no trouble. It's not quite a driving height, but it's definitely off the ground. So usually here, give it a little jab on the accelerator. There we go. And give it one more crank. And there we go. So again, this car sat for a week and a half, untouched, not running, hot, cold, everything you can imagine. And it was a couple pumps on the throttle, you know, crank it for just a few seconds there, let it cycle, and we're good to go. So my car is not running chokes. The tri-power setup that I had put together, basically, normally the center carb would have a choke in it. The ones that I purchased didn't, and honestly I was having trouble tracking them down. The nice thing for me is I live in Florida, so honestly no choke is actually still pretty livable. I can just kind of keep the revs up with my foot for a very brief period, just until that temp needle starts to come up off the bottom, and it'll basically behave just fine. The compressors do draw quite a big load, so that does put some load on the engine. So usually I'll just kind of let it idle down as the temperature starts to come up, and by then the compressors will have cut off and it'll be idling. It'll be a little, you know, grumpy, but it'll idle just fine, and then I can just kind of let it warm itself up for the next few minutes, and pretty much from there we're good to go. As a few extra tasks, we have obviously manual crank windows, and on the bell I even have crank quarter windows, which is kind of cool. Look at that, how futuristic. And then I usually drop the rear window just a little to get some airflow through, and of course we've got passenger windows, which on a car this wide is a bit of a stretch. Alright, so as you heard, the compressors have kicked off and we're chilling. So, usually at this point I'll pop the hood, just make sure everything looks good. Again, it has sat for a little while. And, you know, you just want to make sure there's no weirdness, right? I mean, it is an older car. So, there we go. So, putting you in my pocket for a second here. Everything's looking good. She's actually idling a little bit fast, so I'm wondering if the carb is just not 100% closed, so I'm just going to basically poke that with my finger and see. Well, it may just be a temperature thing. It has warmed up since the last time I ran this, so might be time to back it off of its winter tune. So I might actually have to dial back the center carb. But basically, again, it's like, okay, living with an old car. Oh man, I have to dial in the center carb, but that's the one it's idling on. It's one screw. So I'm literally gonna back that screw out ever so slightly. And what that'll do is let the butterfly close just a little bit more, and that'll slow the idle down just a little bit there as well. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and we'll see what we land on. Well, that was easy. It literally was just that the center carb wasn't closing all the way because it sat for a little while. The tri-power linkage that connects it to the other two carbs basically just had been a little bit got a little sticky where it's lubricated, and basically was just holding it open ever so slightly. So I literally took my finger and went boop, and the idle came right back down. Cycle it a couple times, and it should be okay. So now for the question, what's it like to drive? So for me, hot. I don't have AC in this thing yet. I did save up and I've purchased an AC system that I'm going to install, but for right now we are in Florida summer with no air conditioning, so I'm looking forward to getting rolling because you get a nice breeze going from there. Other than that, it drives like a normal car. Automatic transmission, power brakes, and simple 2-pedal setup. Oh, and the steering wheel makes it go left and right, so keep that in mind. So in all seriousness, I mean, just throw it in gear and you're off. So what's the fuel economy like on one of these things? Did you really ask me that? Realistically, I probably get about 15 to the gallon in this, and that's completely okay because I really don't put that many miles on it. And at the end of the day, it's not about fuel economy when you're buying one of these things. If you're looking for a commuter to maximize your dollar, you already know you're looking in the wrong place, especially if you're getting something with a big American V8 in it. So that being said, again, 15 to the gallon is not great, but at the end of the day, I'm not taking this thing thousands and thousands of miles. So, it does need regular fill-ups. As you can see, I'm at a gas station right now and we're gonna top her up. $87. So driving this thing is like driving a normal car, except don't be expecting to whip it around. Driving classic cars, you'll find a variety of experiences. The newer the car, the better the technology and the suspension and tire tended to get. So this being a 50s car, it really was not great. But that being said, you get into like the 60s cars, they started to improve. You get into the 70s cars, I think they're about the same, honestly. But then, I would say you can either decide to put money into those and make them handle better if you want to, or again, just realize that they're not a modern car that you zip around everywhere at full tilt. It's designed for a slower pace of life, and that's what I do with this thing. I mean, I just cruise, take it downtown and enjoy it rather than trying to blast around everywhere super fast, because it gets a little scary if you start really trying to whip the thing around, and it's just not built for that. But again, drive it like a normal car, drive it like you're not in a rush, and you won't have any trouble at all. Drives completely normally. So from here, I'm going to just leave you guys with some glamour shots of the car. I figure you might want to see them after I've talked you through it a little bit, but give you a little bit of show of the Bell and really see what the point of owning a classic is. It's like owning a piece of art that you get to drive around whenever you want and can really just share with the world, bring smiles to people out there, and recount stories of when they were kids and stuff like that. So it's just an excellent thing. So we'll leave you off with some cool little clips I picked up, and let you take a look around the car and just enjoy it for a minute. Thanks again for watching, and if you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing. And if you really like our content, we do have a Patreon, and we appreciate all of our patrons. Every little bit helps us make these videos, so if you haven't checked it out, please do give it a look, and we do have unique content over there that you can only see on Patreon. So thanks for your time, and enjoy.